Well, welcome to our Monday Masterclass. I think we've got a pretty interesting one here for you today. You know, if somebody said, what's the one single thing we could do to really crank up innovation, success, and organic growth in our company, it's probably what I'm going to mention today. I hope I'm not overselling this, Scott, you think? But we'll see. So here are the things we're going to talk about, a new metric that you can use to measure innovation success, okay? But let me give a little background first. If you want to get the actual white papers, you can come out to Insights and you could go to White Papers and you could download this one on, let me scroll down here a little bit, right there, New Innovation Metrics. That's the one that we're going to be keying in on. But I'm going to do a little preamble first to set this up by going into our research. And some of you may have seen this already, but this new B2B VOC skills research is what I'm going to start with. So let me begin with that just to kind of set the tone for this. I believe that having evidence of customer needs is probably the most important thing that we can do to drive innovation success. If we have hard evidence of it and we can prioritize those needs and get it straight from the customer through quantitative interviews, that's what we're seeing drive success. Now, we've noticed this for many, many years, but we now have some research that supports this. So let me go into this report, and I'm going to go to page 11 here. And let me zoom this up a little bit. I found this to be quite interesting here. Okay, now, if you look at these 12 VOC skills, securing interviews, getting the proper interviews, and so forth, you'll see 3 lines for each of those, 3 bars for each of those. Now, in this research we did, which had over 300 responses, some of the people said, hey, when I'm on a new product development team, we are rarely successful. So you don't want those people on your team. We had other people who said, hey, if I'm on a new product development team, it's usually successful. And then we divided those 2 groups up and we had them assess their competencies on voice of customer. Now look at the one that had the greatest spread between the unsuccessful new product developers and the successful. It's the one called prioritize needs. It was much higher than anything else out there. There were other things like getting the proper interviews and so forth, but prioritizing customer needs. Now, I don't have the whole definition here, but basically prioritizing customer needs means doing a preference interview or something like it and getting hard data right from the customer saying, this is what we really want you to work on. It's got a high market satisfaction gap. And this is what we don't need you to work on. It's got a low market satisfaction gap. So that's prioritize needs. Now, if you read through this report, the fascinating thing about this was that one skill kept coming up over and over again. It was the greatest differentiator on new product success. It was the greatest differentiator on understanding market needs. It was the one that overall people wanted the most. It was the one that people wanted to improve the most if they weren't properly trained. It just kept coming up over and over again. And it's really those quantitative interviews. So that background on the importance of preference interviews, prioritizing needs, I want to move into the subject matter here today. But any questions on this research first? I did that kind of quickly. Everybody okay on that one so far?
I'm good.
All right, now let's move on then, and let's look at this white paper. So, you know, there's one metric out there when it comes to innovation that has kind of ruled the roost for over 3 decades. It's called the Vitality Index, and it's a good measure. I strongly recommend you use the Vitality Index. It's basically the percent of our revenue coming from new products, where new products is defined as something we launched in the last 3 years or last 5 years, okay? And so maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%, people are shooting for 30%, great metric. Now, having said the fact that I like it, let me also say it's got 3 fairly serious shortcomings. First of all, it's not predictive. Second, it's not prescriptive. And third, it's not precise. So when I say it's not predictive, I mean, it's a lagging indicator. It tells you what's already happened, not what's going to happen, okay? The second thing, it's not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you what to do. Imagine you're driving down the road and you know, you want to know which pedal to make you go faster, and you have to guess at which pedal, right? That wouldn't be very productive. So the Vitality Index doesn't say, do I need to increase my R&D staffing? Do I need to hire more? It doesn't tell you that stuff. And the last thing it's not is precise. So, hey, listen, we make hose here, and we came up with a new shade of orange. Can we count that as a new product? I don't know. So there's some shortcomings we have on this, okay? So keep it, but think about what would be a better innovation metric. A better innovation metric would be one that's leading. Hey, if we do more of this, we'll get some good results. It would be actionable. Everybody would know what to do with this. It'd be benchmarkable. You could compare what you're doing today to what you did last several years, and even to what other companies are doing. And then the fourth thing is it would be impactful, okay? It would really make a difference. So as you can guess, the metric I want to introduce you to is hopefully going to be leading, actionable, benchmarkable, and impactful. And in fact, I'm going to mention two new metrics for innovation, but I'm only going to gloss over the first one. And as promised, we're going to really dive into the second one, which is the Commercial Confidence Index. The first one I'm going to gloss over is one called the, let me see if I can get it here. There's a little bit of stuff you have to get to before you get to this. But basically, let me build, I guess it's building. Okay, there it is. It's called the Growth Driver Index, okay? This one takes a little bit more work, but to do this one, you would contact us and say, hey, I want to do this survey in my company, and it's free, by the way. We'd say, great, we'll send you a link for your company, and you would send it out to your colleagues, and they would self-assess your company on 24, or your business on 24 growth drivers. And we've got a database with over 5,000 data points in it. And your mark would be the red one here. And you can compare yourself to the blue, gold, and green and see what you need to get better. And then we average all those for you and give you an overall percentile ranking. So why would I ever want to do the Growth Driver Index as an innovation metric? Well, basically, it's something you can put in place so year after year, you can see if you're building your capabilities. Everybody wants results, but maybe not enough of the time do we think about the capabilities to get those results. This is a way of measuring and improving your capabilities. So I'm not going to spend more time on that, but are there any questions on the Growth Driver Index before I jump to the main topic here for today?
Hey, Dan Mitchell here.
Yes.
This is very interesting. I was just wondering, what kind of cadence do you recommend on this for reassessing oneself, like every years, every 2 months?
I like to see every year. I like to see it every year. And here's the thing. If you're in a large corporation, let's say you're in a multi-billion-dollar corporation and you got a whole bunch of groups in there, I wouldn't do it just for the whole company. I would actually break it down. Let's say you've got 6 different groups, okay? I would have the data coming back for each group separately. Why would I do that? Well, you guys are going to be shocked by this, but there are some business leaders out there who eat their seed corn, and all they do is they just they work their business for the results now, and they don't leave their business stronger in the future, okay? So imagine this, Mithun. Imagine you're doing this for every group every year, and 5 of those group presidents are building their capabilities every year. You should reward them in the same way as they hit their quarterly financials. But what if the 6th one is eating his seed corn and they're raiding the business and doing short-term stuff? This will be the counterbalance to that. So I would do annual, and I would do it at a business or group level as well. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, totally. That's a great insight. And one more final kind of follow-up question on this.
Yeah.
So is this kind of a regular survey-based questioning, or is it a trade-off questioning where somebody has to trade off between, let's say, all the characteristics you have maxed out or something?
Great question. So it's an anchored survey. So what we do is we describe what a -3 looks like in a fair bit of detail, and we describe what a +3 looks like for front end work. And then we do it again for market concentration. So everybody, when they're looking at it, they're using the same benchmark descriptors, if you will, for the -3 and the +3. Then they place their business somewhere along that scale. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Great questions. So that's the first metric, but here's the one that we're going to zoom in on. Okay. There we go. This one is about commercial confidence. So our thinking on it is this, at least for B2B. So you got technical risk and you've got commercial risk, right? And it turns out most people resolve their technical risk in the development stage, which is why we do development, right? To figure out how to solve the problem technically. Well, you might want to mute somebody. You might want to mute yourself if we're getting a little, there we go, great. And then when do people resolve their commercial risk? Well, unfortunately, most people resolve it when they launch it. Hey, Joe, how's your new product? I don't know, Adams, we're going to launch a product next week and we'll see if anybody buys it, okay? What we're saying is you can really resolve most of that commercial risk in the front end if you're B2B, if you do the right type of interviewing, okay? And you do discovery, which is qualitative with sticky notes or something like that, and you're diverging to get all the customer's outcomes. But then if you're not familiar with preference interviews, this is the second round of interviews you do. And you say, hey, we make boxes, you're interviewing Amazon, and you say, how important is it to minimize the likelihood of box damage from moisture? And they give you a rating. These are also anchored. Then you ask, how satisfied are you today? I'll blow it up a little bit more. How satisfied are you today with your ability to minimize the likelihood of box damage from moisture? And so moisture damage is just one of many outcomes. You get importance ratings and satisfaction ratings. Now, what are we hoping to find? We're hoping to find something that scored high in importance and low in current satisfaction. The only thing they might pay us a premium for is something that's important that they're not getting today. So we then, many of you know this already, that helps us put together the market satisfaction gap. It's a very simple formula. I got it here somewhere. It's importance on average times 10 minus the average satisfaction. Okay. So the more important, less satisfied, higher the gap. We've done this with over 1,000 teams all around the world in every imaginable industry. And we know that if the gap is over 30%, roughly, then that means the market is eager to see you work on this. So you've eliminated most commercial risk. You know what to work on and know what not to work on. Now, before I go to the metric, questions, because some of you may or may not be that familiar with the market satisfaction gap. Any questions on this? Okay, you guys are good. So let's do this. Now, how does this metric work? So let me go down here and we'll get to the actual intent of the metric, and that is this. Let's not start any development stage work on any significant project unless we have quantitative evidence of market needs. In other words, let's have a market satisfaction gap chart before we start, or something similar. If you come up with something that's like it, that's fine. But we do that before we start development. And you might go, oh my goodness, Dan, do we do this on all projects? And my answer is, oh, please no. Because people will hate blueprinting and they'll cuss my name because of doing too much blueprinting. A good rule of thumb is this. If you're going to invest about 1 person year of R&D or engineering time in the development or software development, you're going to put in about 12 person months of time in development, then it's justifiable to do the market satisfaction gap. In other words, do some discovery interviews, get all the outcomes, converge on the ones that care about in the preference interviews. And if you want, when we get to Q&A, I'll tell you how we came up with that. There's some research behind that. So when you hear me saying this is a metric to make sure we go into development with known customer needs and evidence, I'm really talking about those projects that are about 12 months of development time and more, okay? All right, so how's the metric work? So it's pretty simple. What you do is you calculate your annual R&D spending for all of your significant product development projects. Anything that you think is going to take more than a person year, and you add up your what all of those projects are, how much money you're going to spend on all of them, and you total that. Okay, so you've got a total R&D spend minus the incremental stuff, and you've got also the spend on each of those projects. Then you ask for every one of those projects, you say, do we have quantified evidence of customer needs? Now, it doesn't have to be a market satisfaction gap. If you've got some other method to know this, fine. But what it has to be is unfiltered and unbiased. It has to be something where the customer gave you a score and you didn't have a chance to say, well, they said this, and what I think they really meant was this. It's got to be unbiased, unfiltered, right from the customer, that we can get our mitts on it and change it, okay? Now, if project A is, yes, we did have something like that, then you call that a known need project. If you go, no, we really didn't do that, you call that an assumed need project, okay? Now, what's your CCI, your commercial confidence index? It's your annual R&D spending on known need projects divided by your total spending. So you have one bucket for known need projects, you got another bucket for assumed need projects, and you put the known need project spending over the R&D spending for all projects. So let me take another breath on that one and see if that is working for everybody. Questions on that? It's pretty simple. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think that this data in your companies is very accessible? Can you calculate annual R&D spending roughly for each of your major projects? Is that hard to get to? What do you think?
I think we can get that.
Yeah, maybe not with two. Yeah, hopefully not. You don't want to make this a huge project, but and maybe if you just focus on the larger ones too. That's kind of one reason why we said that. Yeah. So, okay. So then here's where it gets, I think, kind of interesting. Now you set up a conversation, don't you? Okay. And the conversation could go like this. Let's imagine you're the chief technology officer and you're talking to the R&D director of a division or something, okay? And that R&D director says, but I don't know which project should go in which bucket. I don't measure this. I don't know if we have known need or assumed need. And you say, okay, so let me see. We're spending millions of R&D dollars and we don't know which projects are based upon real customer needs. That's the first part of the conversation. Yeah, I guess so. Well, maybe we should do something about that, right? Yeah, okay. So you put this in place, and the R&D director comes back, goes, Dan, I got some bad news. I did the calculations, and you know what? Our known need projects, there aren't any. So that means my CCI index is 0. And by the way, this is probably going to be the case for many, many businesses out there. But your response should be something fairly upbeat. That's perfectly fine. I'm not a bit surprised. But here's my question for you, Mr. R&D Director. What's your goal for next year? What do you want to have your CCI be for next year? What about the year after that? Let's create a 3-year plan where every year more and more of our R&D spending is devoted to known need projects, not to assumed need projects. You see where we're going with this, right? It's different. We don't expect people to know this right off the bat, but it's going to make a difference in the long term. So that's what we're encouraging people to do. It might be a little bit of bother to do these calculations or to find out if it's known need or or assumed need, more likely the reticence will come from the fact that virtually none of our projects today are really based upon quantitative interviews. We don't have the data. But let's go back to what we started with at the very beginning of our session here today. What's the number one most significant differentiator between people who say my new product development projects are usually successful when I'm working them, and those who say I'm usually a failure at my new product? It's really the ability to prioritize those customer needs with this kind of quantitative evidence. So let's take the number one driver or differentiator between successful product development and failed product development, and let's have a metric for that. And some people say, well, we don't really need a metric. We'll just start doing this, right? I say, well, maybe, but my experience is if you don't measure it, it's going to be tough to keep the focus on that. You know, Peter Drucker said, we really just improve what we measure. And unfortunately, we have so many short-term pressures and other pressures coming at us. A lot of near-term financials are being measured. And so if we don't have a counterbalancing long-term metric that is more of a leading indicator, getting to the fundamental driver of success, we tend to focus on those lagging financial-oriented indicators. So that's why we think this could be powerful. So I think I'm done here. Scott, did you have anything to add on this, or did we beat this one to death pretty good?
No, I think that was very complete. I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay. Any thoughts on this? Anybody? Any reactions? What if I tried to implement this at my company, or any questions at all on this whole topic?
So Dan, a couple of questions. One, just wondering, when have you rolled this out and what has the reception been? Like, do companies come back and say, like, as you said, like, yeah, a lot of companies say it's 0, and then you have already given a solution to how to address that though?
Yeah, almost all of them say it's 0, unless it's a company that we've already been in for a while. And so we haven't, by the way, there's not many companies that are doing this today, but there are some companies that are doing it. And the ones that are doing it the most successfully are the ones that already had their executives kind of buy into the fact they needed to do blueprinting, but they were actually struggling getting people to measure it. And so this gave some accountability. Let's make sure we're actually doing this stuff and actually measuring this. So that's where we've seen the best implementation of this so far. But as you can imagine, some people are quite resistant to it. I mean, it's like we have these habits. Hey, that's close enough. We think we know what customers want. I really like my idea. I don't really want to see a market satisfaction gap because I'm really loving my idea, right? All these things, confirmation bias, they all come into play. And frankly, this is taking out some of the variability out of innovation. It's saying, no, we're just going to work on stuff we know customers want. Now we can be as creative, as innovative as we want to on the solution set, but let's not be creative and guess on what customers want when we could know what they want. Thanks, Mr.
Yeah. I mean, we have been doing some preference and some discovery interviews, and one thing that does come up is like sometimes customer cannot or are not able to define their needs, and there seems to be a little nebulous area where it's like, yeah, this cannot be measured, but this is what we want, so this is what we think. And then we do an abstraction of that at our end. So yeah.
So this is a great point you're bringing up. So what we teach in the blueprinting to help with that is we really focus on customers' outcomes, not their solution set. Because it's absolutely true that many times customers, they have a hard time articulating what they would need from you in a new product. But here's what's interesting. When we really get to that outcome space, things like outcome space would be faster line speed, reduce my labor costs here, cut down my defects there, make my product brighter and shinier. You know, if we focus on the what, not the how, then we find that B2B customers can really help us. But sometimes if we're not careful, they get a little confused and they think that we're asking them for what kind of new hydraulic cylinder you want, right? And that's not it at all. What we're asking them for is, do you want less noise? Do you want better operation at low temperature? Do you want longer lasting? Do you want better fluid retention? You know, we want to get to the outcomes. I don't know if that helps, but once we do that and get to the outcomes, then they're also very qualified to rate the importance and satisfaction. That helps a lot. Good distinction.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Dan.
Hey, a quick question I had is, where do you get the best receptivity to try to implement something like this? From going to like the R&D director, the business director, the marketing group, if such exists, or is it like all the above simultaneously? Or if you're trying to get buy-in, where do you find it's the best place to get it to go first?
So if I had one to pick from, it would be the business leader, because
Okay.
the business leader is responsible for the overall organic growth of that business. And he or she is looking at ways of maximizing rapid, profitable, sustainable growth at the same time that they're minimizing costs, okay? And to be frank, R&D costs are not, they're a major, major part of the cost structure, right? And so many business leaders are very, very interested in getting more out of less. And they're very frustrated when they see a lot of new products fail. Like, we've put all that money into the new product and it failed. And so if you say to them, hey, there's a way, we still may fail on the technical risk and development. We may not be able to overcome the laws of science and nature. That's fine. But at least, sir or ma'am, we can tell you that for all significant R&D spending, if we can do it technically, the customers are going to love it. And we have evidence of that. That's something that business leaders really respond well to. And frankly, most of your R&D leaders will also, because they're getting a little tired of getting beat up on why these new products fail, why aren't we having more success, and so forth. The marketing people should also feel the same way. But if we get the business leader, people tend to line up pretty well after that. Good
Hey, that
question,
makes sense.
Dan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense. Thanks.
you bet. Other questions or thoughts? Well, that's it. Well, look at Scott. We took 30 minutes, which is what we said. If you have another thought on this one, please jump in as well. And if you want to just have a private conversation with us for your company, we're glad to do that as well. We also like to open up the time in case there's any other questions. Could be, I just came back from a discovery interview and it didn't go so well because, or I want to know how to do this better, or can I get Scott Burleson to sign his book on jobs to be done? It could be anything, really. Anybody have any other questions or observations before we wrap up for today?
Maybe just one more question, Dan. Mason here again. When we are doing, and probably it's covered in the course and might have missed it or something, so do let me know that as well. When you are trying to get to those outcome questions and answers from the VOCs and finally to the preference stage, if there are pieces which are confounding, so yeah, there is an outcome that they need, which is, let's say, a car which has a gloss retention for a long period of time, and that there could be multiple attributes that result in that. Could be the quality of the paint, could be the application, and how do you
okay, good. Yeah, very good. So you put your finger on a really key element of the whole process. Let me just jump out to the demo real quickly here, because I think what you're hitting on is an absolutely key point. We find that when you're doing your probing on your sticky notes, if you're using our discovery methodology, okay, you really want to probe pretty in depth on when they say the box is crushed. Tell me more about it. We like to use the what and why method of probing. When does it happen? Where does it happen? Can you please describe it? Then move over into the why. How does it impact you? What's the result of that, and so forth. But then when you, near the end of the interview, you select your TPs, okay? And then on those TPs, this is a really key thing, is to getting that outcome statement. And you want to do this with the customer still in the interview. Are you saying you want to maximize the percent of recycled content? Are you saying you want to minimize the likelihood the box will be crushed? Are you saying, so what we're doing now is we're testing these. They always begin with a verb. We call these outcome statements. They always begin with a verb, and the verb is usually minimize or maximize, frankly, or it can be. And this is kind of like the last skill that comes when somebody is learning how to do blueprinting interviews. But once they get it, it really gets rid of the fuzziness. It's crystal clear. Notice all of these things could be measurable, right? You could have measurement on all of these things. Fail due to percent of box. So if you could get something like that for an outcome statement, then those outcome statements go into your preference interview, and that's when you get that real clarity. Does that help?
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. Other questions or observations? Well, as always, we really appreciate you guys taking your Monday mornings and coming and joining us here. And if something comes up, got a question, you know where Scott and I live, just drop us an email. We're glad to convince with you, okay? Otherwise, have a great rest of the week, everybody.
Hey,
Thank
thanks.
you.
You too, Dan.
Great week, everybody. Take
Just
care.
not-